There's been some really interesting new guidance issued to journalists this week, and it's all about reporting on missing persons. And it's been highlighted a little bit because of that awful case of that poor lass who ended up in the river. And one of the problems with that was identified was all these sort of online sleuthing, all the amateur detectives. But the harm it caused, not just to the family, but also to the investigation. Because you may remember in that case, the police had to put out an announcement saying, just to let you know, she'd been a bit depressed and she has a drink problem. And lots of people go, that's outrageous. Why have the police said that about her? Well, they actually said that at the behest of the family. Because the family were just really getting hurt, were just sick to death of people sleuthing and doing all these mystery things and speculating wildly, but also interfering with the investigation because people were going, oh, it's something sinister or something suspect. And the problem with that was it was actually causing problems with witnesses. For example, there were people that the police thought might have some information. We've seen on a CCTV down the street, somebody was walking down there at the relevant time. Maybe they saw something. Now, there's no the slightest hint they are involved or they are a suspect. Because like I say, the police were not treating this as a crime. They just thought maybe somebody had seen somebody, maybe you walked past her. But they couldn't actually appeal and ask for that person and say, are you the person in this video? Because everybody would have been online going, ha, look at his shifty eyes, I think it was him, there's something suspicious about it. And also the fact that people who had seen things were very reluctant to come forward and reveal it because they didn't want the press or, more importantly, online amateurs, citizen journalists, whatever you want to call them, making them suspects. And that was causing tons and tons of problems. So that's one of the issues that this report addresses. It also goes into language. I mean, it's very interesting. It always says, use missing, not wanted. They're not criminals, they are missing people. Don't say the case of, because that's just, it's impersonal. Say the disappearance of. Only get information from official sources. Only report on stuff that's been released by the relevant families or the police or some other official body. Don't just start sharing everything you see online. Be very careful about speculating whether it's somebody who unalived themselves, as they say, because, that can actually trigger people. You do get actually on the back of these things, you quite often get little clusters and waves of people, copycatting effectively. And they've said, obviously, don't do that. Put the resources. If it turns out, they said, do not speculate in the first place. If it turns out at the end that's what it was, then yeah, and do all the, if you've been affected by this, make sure, you put a link to the Samaritans, all that sort of thing. They've also said that if somebody is found, whether alive or unalive, erase their digital footprint. A lot of time people will need to recover from this, or the family will need to recover from this. And if every time they go online and go on Facebook or put their loved ones' names in, they don't want to see all these stories coming back. And also, if you're the person involved, you don't want to have all that sort of have to relive all that. It's all very, very interesting. And they're saying be about. I mean, it's like I say, language is very important. But the key thing they keep coming back to is do not speculate, and do not spread rumours and gossip, and certainly don't do anything that will interfere with the investigation, especially by suggesting there is something sinister, when there's no reason at this stage to suspect that. Now, obviously, if then it turns out there might be something suspicious about this and police are saying, there's a person of interest, can you help us track down this person? Then yes, you can release that information, arguably, just using the descriptions that have been given and the press releases, but don't speculate, don't start sleuthing, don't start Googling everybody who's got the same name as somebody and then reporting all sorts of nonsense, because lots of innocent people get caught up in this as well. People share the names with people that are involved in this, and the next thing you know, it's all, oh, this is the person, we've tracked down his Facebook page and look at him, you can tell he's a wrong un, and it turns out to be totally a different person. Now, what's interesting on this is, I mentioned before that the Law Commission are looking at revamping contempt of court, and one of the issues that they've looked at is, should this be held as a contempt? Because obviously, at this stage, legal proceedings aren't sort of contemplated, so arguably people can say and speculate what they want. But because of the fact that if this is ever going to go to any sort of trial or even any sort of inquiry, then all this stuff just really, really hurts. Because it is effectively interfering with an investigation and therefore interfering with the course of justice. So it's, how do you police this? I mean, I've spoken before about the Online Safety Act and, the offence of knowingly publishing false information that causes distress. You could probably get an offence there where people were speculating and that speculation caused distress to the family. So maybe that's one way they would address this, because then you don't have to worry too much about the contempt aspects. You just have to look at, what is actually the consequence of your action. But this is something I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about, because, obviously you're watching things like this, you have an interest in the law, and you have an interest in, things being online. And I comment about things, and obviously I'm very cautious about sort of contempt of court and defamation and things like that. But you probably notice I tend not to comment about things or speculate about things, just because generally, that's, my opinion about things is no more important or any more relevant than anybody else's. In fact, I keep coming back to say I think actually lawyers are, worse at factual stuff than, regular people are, because we tend to overanalyze things and, be too legalistic about it. We're actually warned about that. I mean, that's a common thing in defamation. The starting point in defamation is they actually say, don't approach this as lawyers. And they also say that to the judge. So, if it's a defamation case, obviously you get all the paperwork together, but usually the first thing the judge will do is read or look at the complaint of article and statement without actually hearing what any of the lawyers are arguing on either side, because the judge then puts themselves in the position of a regular person who's just going, what does this look like at first blush to me? How do I interpret this? And similarly, when we're arguing about the meanings of words, it's like, don't argue like a lawyer does and say, well, technically that could mean this and that could mean that. It's like, no, what would just somebody picking up a copy of the Evening Standard that's been left on the tube and reading it, and not paying too much attention to it, just having a quick look through, they don't know any background, what would they think of it? So that's the way we approach it. But yeah, I mean, I'll put a link in the description to the actual paper that's been released. It's been released by the charity Missing Persons, who themselves have said, they can act as a conduit. So if people do want to publish something or do want to comment on this, check with them first, and they will make sure you have the up-to-date information, official information, and they'll also advise you as to how to go about publicising this, if indeed you actually should. So there you go. A bit of a depressing subject, but I thought you might find it interesting. Vaguely interesting, vaguely accurate, and vaguely useful. Well, hopefully never useful.